This is Nicole Sauce from the Holler Homestead giving you a woman's take on the walk towards independence because we're living free in Tennessee. Howdy, everyone. Welcome to episode 28 of Living Free in Tennessee. Today is Monday, March 20th, 2017. And last week I shared with you that we were going through a change here at the Holler Homestead. Today, we will talk about how important it is to build flexibility into your life because it helps make you more resilient when things change. We will also talk about what has happened since we started getting serious about the egg and coffee business, cover a little bit about how the paper is doing, and I will share with you some of my experiences from the grafting workshop that I went to over at Cider Hollow Farm over the weekend in Savannah, Tennessee. But first, if you want to drop me a note, question, or comment, you can email it to nicolesauce@gmail.com or leave a comment over at Living Free in Tennessee. And you know something? If you are an iTunes user and feel like dropping me a review on iTunes, I have one or two, but it'd be awesome to get a few more just because good ratings on iTunes means a few more listeners. And now, on to our regular segments. First up, Eating Seasonally, Tales from the Prepper Pantry. This is where we share what we're eating as it comes to us and talk about ways to use what we store. And this week, despite all the freezing shenanigans last week, we have wild mustard going strong, watercress and dandelion greens, and of course the dead nettle. It's blooming at this point, so we've got pretty purple flowers for our salads, but it's about to come to an end. And chickweed will be around for a bit longer. We've been picking some of that chickweed and putting it in salads, but also tossing it to the ducks. From the garden, I've got baby kale from the super kale plant. That's right, that plant that managed to coexist with a comfrey plant last year and developed this 2-foot long stem before putting leaves up. It died over the winter finally. And right where its roots were, I have little baby kale plants. So those are yummy on salads. I'm going to see if they grow. I might move one. Still haven't decided about that. I'm going to be out of town a lot of this week. So they're just going to stay right where they are. And they are now growing closer than ever to the comfrey plant, which means we'll get to see the battle of the comfrey and kale once again this year. From the pantry, we have about a half box of potatoes left, and we are trying to get through them before they go bad. This is probably the best we've ever done at getting through our potatoes before they grow those legs or the eyes start growing long, which become roots if you bury them in the ground. And, one bad potato can make a lot of potatoes go bad. So we have half a box left. I'm very proud of us. I did buy fewer potatoes from my farmer friends this year than in former years, so it looks like we're getting closer to reality on how many potatoes we should store over the winter. I planted a good number of these in the garden this year already, so we'll see what they do there. Some of them are in a good, ideal growing situation, and some of them I just was like, hey, here's a hole in the ground. I'll drop the potato in and see what happens. Those probably won't do as well, but who knows? You never know. And I had a whole bunch of potatoes around, so they are in the ground. And in fact, if you are local to the area and need a few seed potatoes, let me know, because my plan is to get through these in the next 2 weeks. What we're doing with them right now is we're cleaning up about 10 or 12 of them and parboiling them, which means we boil them not till they're totally squishy, but pretty close. And then we store them in the refrigerator because potatoes really can grow botulism if you're not careful. And we take them out in the morning and grate them. And by we, I mean Mark. Grate them up and saute them like hash browns. He'll make a batch of hash browns in the morning, have eggs or whatever he wants to have for breakfast, and then I usually end up coming back through at lunch and having hash browns with whatever I'm having for lunch. If I'm having a stew, then I can just throw them in the stew. It's a really nice way to have them around, and they taste pretty good this way. I mean, who doesn't like hash browns, right? Now, I'm sure there's one of you in the audience who doesn't like hash browns, but you don't have to tell me that. And then we are also getting serious about the corn. We are almost through Cornmageddon. It is so close. And I made a stew this week, the holler stew this week. It was pretty yummy. I'll tell you about that in a little bit. But I found a bag of frozen corn in the freezer. So we've started using up that frozen corn, and then we're back to the canned corn to go on salads. To do that, I boil it for 5 minutes and let it cool and store it in the refrigerator, and then just throw it on top of salads when I make them. Same with the green beans. Green beans are really good this way. We are hitting the pickled goods hard, and in fact, I have 1 jar left of my Aunt Helen's famous beet recipe. And I plan to bring that jar down to Jack Spirko's event this week as a possible barter blanket item. He does this thing at his events where they put out a barter blanket and you can offer things up to trade for other things. And I thought, well, I'll just bring down this jar of Aunt Helen's famous pickled beets and see if anybody's into trying that. Of course, I'll have coffee with me as well, and I do need to look around and see if I have any like homesteader junk. You know, what's junk to me may not be junk to other people. I'm not bringing a ton of stuff down to the barter blanket just because I've heard that if you bring a ton of stuff, you don't usually trade a ton of stuff. So just sort of trying to be a bit strategic about that. I might actually bring some of that vanilla too. Who knows? And we forgot to can the extra pork stock. So last week or the week before last, we made a pork roast and then we, of course, boiled it into stock. And then we've been using the stock and stuff. And usually what I do is I use some of the stock in something and I can a few jars of it so that I can use it in a recipe in the future and I don't have to take up freezer space. But things have been a little busy. It's spring. This is a typical thing that happens to me in the spring. I have wonderful intentions, doesn't happen. So it had been sitting in the refrigerator for about a week yesterday, and I gave it a sniff to make sure it was still okay, and then threw it in the crock pot with some potatoes, with some of that corn I found in the freezer. I cut up our last onion. I found one more onion in the prepper pantry, and I cut that up. Added a bunch of garlic because we're heavy on the garlic at this time. And then I found a smoked chicken breast from our barbecue connection. We have a trade in place with a barbecue guy. He makes great smoked chicken breasts. So I cut that up in there and then just turned it on and walked away for 6 hours. And we had this fantastic stew. And the corn consistency was good. Actually, come to think of it, I forgot to tell you, mushrooms. I had some mushrooms in the fridge. Those went in the stew too. So it was like this corn chowdery thing. I actually ended up adding about half a cup of half and half to that after the stew was completely done, and then salted it to taste. And Mark told me, as usual, he said, it was the best stew you've ever made. He says that a lot. So I'm pretty sure it's just that he was hungry and the stew was tasty. So that's how we've been using what is growing around us and what we're storing this week at the Holler Homestead. And the coming week, as I said, I'm gone for 5 days. That's 5 out of 7. Mark's on his own, and he's a pretty good survivor cook. I mean, he's the breakfast guru here at the Holler Homestead, making sure I leave him with a lot of coffee. And I sort of queued up that stew so he'd have something to tap into. I'm thinking about maybe doing up some meatballs and cooking those tomorrow, just so he has something ready to grab because, of course, I'm gone right when it's time to be hitting the streets for selling ads in the next edition of the Center Hill Sun. So trying to leave him with some things in the fridge so he's not tempted to spend money when he's out and about doing ad sales. Okay, next up, we have getting the gardens ready. And this is where we share what we're doing to get our food growing operation up and running. And as with last week, we're still going hot and heavy on Operation Eyesore. I took Operation Eyesore into my house because I kind of realized that all the things that are out and annoying me are the things I use, and all the things that are put away right now are the things I don't use. So I've been going through and either putting in the Goodwill box the things we no longer use or have never used, just sort of had, or I'm storing them where they're harder to get so that I have the cabinet space for the things I need to use on a day-to-day basis. And this is something that changes seasonally. So why does this have anything to do with gardens? Well, because some of the things are gardening things. So the heat mats, the grow lights, the pots, like those things are now out because they were buried deeply for the winter. And what I no longer need are some of the warm clothes, some of the things that we cook in the winter. We're not using the same cooking things. And it is time to reset the kitchen for canning season. So I've gotten almost all the canning stuff out. Not quite yet. I need to still put away a few more winter items. I'm getting my seeds in a good area so I don't get confused. Like last year, I lost whole packets of seeds that showed up later in the fall just because I wasn't organized with my seeds. So I'm just making sure the things we're using now for the garden are well organized, because it's going to do nothing but get more busy from here. Now, this week I managed to do what I said I was going to do and transplant the tomato seedlings. And I also moved them to the greenhouse because I looked at the weather yesterday morning and it was not going to freeze for at least the next week. And that's good because I'm gone for the week. And nothing sucks more than being the one person who's maintaining the farm while the other person's away. And then there's a freeze and you need to move everything out of the greenhouse and down to the house so that it stays toasty. And this is because we do not have a heater in our greenhouse. So got those done, came in the house, and the sun was just setting yesterday when I got that done. And I looked at the weather and it said 37 degrees. 37 degrees in the holler is really 32 degrees, and that's freezing. And I thought, oh man, these, some of mine were leggy, but by the time I was done transplanting them, about an inch of tomato was up above the dirt on all of the transplants. And I didn't think the plants would be too pleased about freezing. They do have heat mats under them up there because I do have power to the greenhouse. And I was like, well, the roots will be toasty, but there aren't very many roots there yet. Like that's what we're doing right now as a tomato seedling. We're developing our roots. So I had a chat with some friends and they just recommended I put row cover in the greenhouse over them because 32 is, it's right on the border. A tomato plant actually can get cold and not die, but I was just worried about the sensitive nature of the seedlings. And then, of course, I saw that there's another freeze coming this week now. And that's kind of how the weather goes here in Tennessee, right? They say nothing's coming, and then in the period of 12 hours, they change their mind. And this is, I think I've said this before, I am 1 mile from 2 other zones. So if you look at what zone I'm in, I am 1 mile from the borders of 2 other zones. So there's 3 zones converging here. And that means the weather can push up or down or over. And suddenly you're in that other zone that was near you. So I'm not really in a zone that requires us to stay a little flexible. So I'm happy to say the row cover worked really well, and it didn't really get to 32 degrees last night. So I'm thinking maybe they were doing that to freak everybody out to cover their plants, just so nobody yelled at the weatherman. And tomato seedlings look good this morning. I took the row cover off so they get lots of good light. It's a little overcast here today. I don't have lights up in the greenhouse at this time, although I could put my lights up there. I thought, well, they're getting a lot of light from the sun. We'll see how they do for the week while I'm gone. And hopefully when I get back, I'll have some seedlings that are thinking about being ready to be sold because I have 100 tomato plants and I need 10 of them. So I might as well sell the other ones. The other thing that happened during the transplanting process, though, was the usual. My tags got all mixed up. This happens to me every year, and I should learn just to do 1 seedling tray per type of plant. But the way I do my seedlings, I just do rows in the trays and I mark them. And when the grow light came in and got set up, the tags got knocked over, and then through moving the tray around, they moved around, and I could tell. I was like, I know how many rows I did of each, but I could tell they were not right. Something was wrong. So I went into my history of my phone and found a picture of the tray when I planted it with all the signs up. And wouldn't you know it, that saved my rear because I could start on one side and count the rows of each of the types of seedlings in this one tray. And I was able to rebuild what kind of plants they are. So it looks like not only will we have some tomato seedlings to sell, we will know what they are, I think. No, I'm pretty confident because I did some labeling on the actual tags to indicate if it was 1 row or 2 rows. I went right to left and I took that picture. So that saved my bacon, man. I've also got beets, carrots, lettuce, radishes, and things of that nature in the ground. And I looked yesterday. The radishes, of course, have already germinated. And what looks like beets might have germinated, but that seems a little fast. So I'm guessing it's the radishes that are poking their little leaves up. And I did interplant them, so they will be next to each other. Sometimes it can be a little hard to tell what's a beet and what's a radish, but when the radishes are ripe, it is very obvious. So that's pretty cool. The carrots usually take a little bit longer, and I'm hoping the lettuce will come out and see me this week. Mark's all ready to go with some water. We spot water when the seeds come up. So that's going to be awesome. And hopefully we'll get yummy lettuce in, May, maybe at the end of April. We'll see. We are working on more wood chipping for areas where we don't want things to grow. So I've been moving chips around. We have not finished the retainer wall, but we will when I get back. And then I went into the garden today, and one of my lovely dogs, I think, got into the garden and started digging up the horseradish plant. Like, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, man. Like, why are you doing that? So before I leave in 2 days, I'm going to wood chip around that, make sure Mark sees the flag where it is so he doesn't think it's a weed. And just make sure that is protected from any possible frosts, because I don't really want to frost the exposed root of a horseradish plant. And that was the one I had dug down because I was going to separate it, and it's as big around as a coffee mug. That thing's awesome. And I just thought I'd let it go and see if it puts off any little pups and just move the pups rather than cut that beautiful root up. In the garden economics project, I haven't spent any more money, but we are planning to relaunch watercress plant sales as soon as I get back from Jack Spirko's workshop. And hopefully we'll sell a few more. We've done pretty well on those. And I even managed to take one to a friend over the weekend at Cider Hollow and put it in his creek. And I'm hoping it looked like a pretty good spot for watercress. So I'm hoping that will turn into a nice patch for him, and that we have been part of the catalyst to get more watercress growing in the state of Tennessee in different places. My theory here is the more you help spread the plants that are edible around, the better it is for everybody if we have a SHTF situation. I usually think the words as I'm saying them. So now it's time to move on to the main topic of the show. And this is a topic that I wanted to do last week, but it was a little too close last week. So this is why build resilience into your life. And a week and a half ago now, I had a pretty major change, and it's kind of a scary change for me. And it got me to thinking, like, over the last couple of years, I've been working step by step to just become a little bit more resilient on my own so that I'm not dependent on a job. So, sometimes it feels like this time in our lives, or right now in history, is a unique time of rapid change spurred by technology and by a country that's coming maybe into its golden years. And I think about that sometimes because people talk about how it's never happened like this before, and I don't really agree. I think it's always been changing. It might be changing faster right now, but it's always been changing. I looked back over my family history, and two generations ago, my family went through a very similar time to right now. It was a different kind of technology that was changing how the economy worked and how people survived, but it was like in the course of my great-grandfather's life, we went from barely poverty subsistence living as the norm off the land to cars driving you like people could afford to own their cars. So think about that change. And then even in my own lifetime, when I was in first grade, we didn't have computers in school. And now I'm like, my phone is more powerful than the first Commodore 64 thingy that I learned how to program on in junior high school. And, I think about that, and I think, this is a lot like that time. And that means I can learn a lot from just what happened to my family. My grandfather bought and lost several homes over the course of his life. And he moved from Missouri to Oregon, and he failed at a homestead, or he at least tried to have a homestead and moved on. I don't know if he failed or realized there was a better opportunity somewhere else. But the one thing that my grandfather did is he never gave up. And he loved his wife and his kids, and they learned how to grow food. I mean, I think he already knew how to grow food before he left, but his kids learned from him how to grow food and not to be ashamed of hard work or hard times. And they did this right alongside him. I know my grandma told me this time of year for them, you had a fairly boring mix of what you were eating. Your potatoes were basically gone, but the new potatoes would be coming up in the garden. And because they were growing food for storage, you couldn't just go out there and harvest all the new potatoes, so you wouldn't have any in the fall. So my great-grandfather would designate one of the plants where they could dig around the edges. They were allowed to dig around the edges and and take those new potatoes. And she said they were the best tasting things because that and the early greens after sort of a dark winter of meat and whatever was canned just added something special to the meal. Now think about that. Like you have that story alongside mine, which is like I can still go to the store and just buy a fresh potato. I can buy oranges. It's amazing. As I look at all the stories I've heard about my great-grandfather, what he did was stick to his priorities, and he remained flexible. He worked hard, and he passed on these ethics to his children so that when they hit hard times, they knew how to keep going through it. And their hard times were, making it through World War II and the aftermath of that. You see, I think we lose resilience when we stop being willing to try new things, to flex with our world, so to speak, to admit that the thing that we trained our whole life to do is no longer either needed or feasible. I mean, think about automotive workers who had one trade and lost their jobs and never had a job again. That's not very resilient. You knew a trade and you can't learn something new? Sure you can. I know it's hard, and I know you don't want to, and I know that you probably had an awesome job that paid really well, and now it's not needed, and that's a bummer. And, we think about why that happened. Was it because evil corporations want to screw their employees out of work? No, just the technology changed, and they needed fewer people. I think in our case, they had fewer customers because the competition kind of outcompeted them, and some of those jobs probably had, overinflated salaries. So that's something that's happened that I've seen happen in my lifetime. And I think it happened once before my lifetime in that same industry. Part of our lifestyle here on the homestead is about building resilience into our day-to-day activities. And that's because no matter what happens, we only know one thing, right? Change is coming. And no matter how stable our situation is, we still only know one thing. Change is coming. This idea that you work one job your whole life and retire to play golf, and that's normal, that's the norm, that's a really awesome idea, and it's a beautiful dream, and it's happened for a lot of people, but it's not very sustainable, and it's more like a fiction, I think. I think it's like we sold that dream. We've been sold that dream. But when you look at people who try to do, like the majority of people right now who think they're going to do that, they don't have a pot to piss in, really. They have like plans to depend on their Social Security. They might have a little retirement, but a lot of these people have gigantuan mortgage payments in their 60s. Like, how do you retire when you have that? I don't even know how like maybe you can do some of that, but it's not very feasible long term, especially when you look at where Social Security is in the priority of the budget, right? Like, it's not like people paid into Social Security and it was put into an investment account for the whole country and it grew with the economy. No, it was put into the government's budget and they spent it. The money's gone. And that's really not fair to the people who paid in, is it? But that is what it is now. So it's kind of up to us to think about resilience. And, business cycles don't work like we maybe wish they did. They don't always grow. Sometimes there's contractions. But before we get too dark and dreary, because resilience is actually kind of a cool thing, let's talk about what I mean by building resilience into your life. First and foremost, I mean flexibility. Flexibility means that you are clear about your priorities, you know what the core of your priorities are, and that you're able to flex with the world around you to still maintain your priorities. And that may mean like, I am looking around and I see that there's this new thing that's kind of like the 3D printers. Hey, I'm going to find a friend with one and learn how to set up plans for printing stuff out on 3D printers. That's flexibility. And it means that you're willing to accept that what you're doing now may not be what you're doing forever. and look at what's going on and get excited about those and learn new things. There's danger in being overly flexible, or rather flexing all the time without sticking to anything, though. So while first and foremost, resilience is flexibility, secondly, it's responsibility. You are responsible for taking care of yourself, and you are responsible for taking care of your family, and you are responsible for helping in your community, right? Most good people, and most people are good, understand that. They may not like it sometimes because it's hard, but that's responsibility. And part of that means, while remaining flexible, also remaining kind of real about like, hey, we got to get dinner on the table, or we need to keep a roof over our heads, and we need to be thinking about the fact that FEMA might not be here if a tornado hits very quickly. So what do we do to make sure we're ready for that? Or our job might not be here in a year, and what are we going to do if all of our income goes away? How are we going to keep a roof over our heads or food on the table? There are ways built into the current government structure to help people through times like that. But imagine what would happen if you lost your job and didn't need unemployment because you'd already planned for it and whatever, and you could move on. Or a tornado hit and you had some food stored and some water stored and a backup shelter stored, so you were able to bounce right up and take care of yourself. This is taking just basic responsibility for your basic needs. And then, you have to think about, what are your basic needs? They're not as much as we think they are. And finally, when I'm talking about resilience, I'm talking about having more control over the things you can control and worrying less about the things you can't. So, like adding food stability, that's something I like to talk a lot about because I'm into that. And learning to grow your food is one way to do that, but learning to have a food plan and to use your pantry in a powerful way means that you have food ready to go over the long haul. And I think we talked about storing food and building up the stores of food so that you have food stability. Because imagine this, you lose your job and you have a year's worth of food. You don't have to worry about buying a single thing at the grocery store. You may be simplifying some of your day-to-day things, but wouldn't that be awesome? Like, okay, I know I've got food and all I've got to do is pay the mortgage. Woohoo! And I also mean learning new skills here. So let's say you have a day job as a computer programmer, but you kind of like welding. Well, go out and learn how to weld in your off time. You never know. Like, maybe you're a science teacher for that matter. Like, if you're a science teacher who also knows how to weld and your teaching position goes away, you've got another skill that's marketable. And actually right now, welders make a boat ton of money. So it's kind of a, look around, like, what are you interested in, and learn how to do those things, because that just adds flexibility to what you can do. I mean, I learned how to rewire a house because I had to in my 20s. And that's just because I couldn't afford to pay an electrician. And I had some really good advisors help me through that. But because of that, when I was out here a year ago and my breaker down at my pump house went out, guess who changed the breaker and didn't have to pay an electrician? That saved me a ton of money. I just went out, brought the breaker, changed it out, thing was up and running again, and we were good to go. I didn't have to wait 3 days for an electrician to have time. I didn't have to pay the guy $150 to come all the way out here. So, those sorts of learning things you like. And I like electricity. I don't know why. I just like it. And, I'm not the end all be all knowledge person on electricity. There are things that I would rather, get somebody to help with. And the funny thing is, like, 12 volt versus normal household power systems. I'm still wrapping my head around 12 volt right now. And yeah, converting back and forth and all of those things. But that's just another way, because I like power, I'm really interested in solar. Because I like power, I'm really interested in batteries and how I can make batteries work for me and that sort of thing. So I don't know, like it's that having, the curiosity and control of the things you can control, and then not worrying about the things you can't. Like, even at the local level, my county is going to do what my county is going to do, right? And like, I was just in a meeting about the latest food regulations and how they're being enforced in the county. And there are some things there that are freaking irritating to me about, forbidding people from eating good food so that they go buy crap at the store because that's considered safe. Like my eggs aren't safe, but, a baked good Twinkies with all the preservatives in it, that's great. That's super safe. Not going to get you sick. Well, luckily we have some cottage food laws here in Tennessee that allow me to sell my eggs, but they do force me. Like, this is great. I have to sterilize all my eggs. And it used to be you had to immerse them in the chlorine bleach solution. Now you're allowed to wipe them down with bleach wipes. So that's a little less chemical on the egg. But do you know what that does to the egg? That takes off the protective coating that helps your eggs last forever. So I have eggs in my kitchen that are not washed. Those are for me. Those will last 90 days at room temperature, no problem. In fact, I have one out there right now. I'm experimenting with how long the duck egg will last before it goes bad. And it's been 2 months. So, yeah. The minute you take the coating off, you better keep those puppies refrigerated because the outside air permeates the shell now, which means there's no protective coating for what's inside, which means the eggs go bad. So, I don't know, but I can't control that at the moment. I just know that if I get inspected and I have not sterilized my eggs, or if somebody got sick, for heaven's sake, and I hadn't sterilized my eggs, I would be in bigger trouble than if I just flippin' sterilize my eggs. And so I do. So when we talk about resilience, it almost sounds like prepping, doesn't it? It sounds like prepping with a fancy term. And gosh, maybe that makes me think sometimes, what is prepping really? Is it the crazy guy with the AR whatever on the TV with, a bunker and 20 million rounds stored underground? Is that prepping? I don't think that's prepping. If you do it right, you're prepping for things that might go wrong. Why is that such a crazy idea? And I think if you want to call it resilience, great. Building resilience into your life means you are preparing for things that might go wrong. I've got a bag by my front door with a bottle of water in it, some chargers, some food, and a few other things. You know why I have that? They call that a bug out bag, by the way, in the prepping community. But you know what that really is for? That's a bag I can grab on my way out the door if I get a call from the hospital saying my brother-in-law or somebody else is in the hospital and we need to go down there right now. And frankly, I have used that bag one time for a hospital emergency, and I was so glad I had it because we ended up at the hospital in the middle of a flu outbreak. It seems like I'm always at hospitals in the middle of a flu outbreak. I didn't want to touch anything, certainly not the drinking fountain, and we had a bottle of water and charge cables so that we were not screwed, stuck at the hospital with our phones going dead, unable to give updates to other family members. And there was healthy snacks in there, so I didn't have to go to the cafeteria at the hospital and eat their stuff, which frankly isn't very good. So that's just being prepared? Really? That's crazy? I don't think that's crazy. I think that's smart. And I think when you're looking for longer resilience in your life, what are you preparing for next? Well, a power outage or a job loss. And it's funny because I have been a prepared person for a while. And then I came across the Survival Podcast by Jack Spirko because he was doing an episode on wild plants. And that's when I learned that prepping is not a fear thing. That's what he'll always say. If you're coming at prepping from a place of fear, you're doing it wrong. You come at prepping from the standpoint of, preparing for the things that might actually happen to you in your lifetime. And a job loss is a big one. My dad had a sudden job loss a couple times right after I got out of high school. He lost jobs, and I don't think that was very easy for him because he'd been in one of those jobs he'd been in for 20 years. And that's a long time to be at a job and then lose it. So now think about job loss. Wouldn't it be great if you were able to know that you can cover stuff if you lose your job and you can feed the kids and pay your mortgage? And I guess that's what I mean by resilience, because living on a homestead can do that. And really what got me thinking about this topic was a very personal situation that, to be honest with you, I wasn't sure if I was going to share it with you today or not. And I think I will. It's just, it sounds so dramatic when I say it. And because we've been building resilience into our lives for a long time, it's not as dramatic as it sounds. But about a week and a half ago, I lost my job. And I mean, that was not an emotionally fun thing to have happen. It's a temporary layoff. It's weird because I'm in control of the decision, but it was clear to me that for that organization to be successful, they couldn't pay me anymore. So I laid myself off, basically. And that means no more salary. I don't have a job anymore. I have this. I have other things that we're doing, but I felt it was the most important thing to do to help that organization be where they need to be. And I mean, it sounds shocking. And I mean, again, I had a couple of days where I was like, man, I can't believe that just happened. But then I started looking around and I realized, well, I have other income streams built already. And some of them, if I work at it, they could turn into a really good income stream. And part of why this is I've seen this coming for a while now. I knew that for that organization to do well in the long term, at some point I was going to need to transition to a board only position and let the next generation keep it going, because it's the kind of business that requires innovation. And while some people consider me to be innovative, I'm not sure I am. There's also this time where young whippersnappers are better innovators, and you need to empower them to do that. I've got a couple people on board who are awesome, and they're doing a great job, and we need to keep them going, not just keep me on salary because I started the thing, right? So, because I saw that transition coming years ago, we've been building local income into our life with the idea that it'd be great if I didn't have to have income from a job. And we've not been spending money we don't have, which it's really easy to do in our society, just to spend money you don't have. We started building local income, as I said, and frankly, this transition is a little uncomfortable. I can tell you that we're going to make it, though. We're going to be okay. And I have a year or two of food stored. So if I didn't go to the grocery store again for the rest of this year, we'd be fine. And then my mortgage is super low because we live in a rural area. Our property taxes are redonkulously low compared to most people. It's under $300 a year. I could probably babysit every afternoon and cover our expenses. So we're going to be fine. And it gives the flexibility for that organization to do what they need to succeed with my help, of course. It's not like I'm not doing anything for them. I'm just not pulling a salary anymore. And this transition is actually an opportunity for me. It's an opportunity to build some things that are new in our lives. And to me, that's exciting, even though it's also a little scary. And I mean, this no sooner happened than another opportunity came along. And my plan is to kill it at my presentation this week, by the way, because I'm teaching people how to roast coffee, by the way, guys, at somebody's house who runs a fairly successful podcast. Okay, that's a really good opportunity to do what? Sell more coffee. Well, what happens when I sell coffee? Oh, more income. So you see, all I've been doing is focusing on making sure that goes well and getting my ducks in a row, so to speak. And on a related note, I'm also selling more ads for for realsies this time because you do need to pay the bills, so to speak. I have to say though, we've done this resilience thing wrong and we've done it right. So one of my problems is I like to buy things, especially food preservation things, right? I don't have a vacuum canner, but man, do I want one of those. I've managed to have that want under control for a while, but I did buy the electric pressure canner because that's made my life way better. So if you're listening to this going, crumbs. If I lose my job next week, I'm so screwed. What do I do? Don't worry. I've thought about this. There are 4 ways I could say you can get started. These are 4 things that if I had it to do all over again, I would do them all at, like one at a time rather than doing what I did for the last 10 years, which was expand and contract and expand and contract. And I kind of made some mistakes along the way, lost some money along the way, made some stupid decisions like most people. So here are 4 ways to get started in building resilience into your life. The first one is actually the one that you can do without really needing to build something new, and that is to simplify and frugalify. Now, if you've already gone through this phase, you can just call me later and tell me more ideas of how to be more frugal or simplify your life. But what I mean by this is after you've set your clear priorities for what's important, look at what you're doing that doesn't support that and get rid of it. Simplify. Find different ways to, like Mark and I love to go kayaking. Kayaking is free, by the way. A kayak costs something, but you can get those for pretty cheap. And then once you have it, kayaking is free. You throw water in the water bottle, pack a sandwich, jump in the car and go to the river, and hop in your kayak. You're done. The only way kayaking really costs money is if you're needing to go to a pay location where you have to pay to park or something, which means you just need to look around and find other places to kayak. Or I guess if you're paying a teacher to teach you how to do it better, but just going out a great day on the river, you don't have to spend hardly anything. I mean, I guess we pay for gas when we do that. Okay. So $3 in gas and we're kayaking for a day and having a fantastic time. And that's a simple pleasure, right? Frugalifying, which is a word I have made up today, is just becoming more frugal. And you can do this in a way that doesn't make you feel like you don't have enough. Like Mark and I probably eat the equivalent of a Thanksgiving meal several times a week. It's just, we always have really good food because that's really important to us. And it hardly costs us anything at all. That's because we're cooking things that we're able to either produce here or trade for. Or sometimes we buy some things on sale. Sometimes we actually spend big bucks and buy them not on sale. But because we live the way we do, we're able to support one of our priorities, which is to eat good food and share it with friends. And anybody who's been here knows that you'll get a bowl of holler stew if I have it when you stop by. Another way we frugalify and simplified is, you know what I want so badly? Someday, maybe. I want a second story on my house. And I want to move everything that's down here up there. And the reason I want to do that is it will bring light into the house. It will eliminate some of the moisture retaining issues that one has when one lives in an underground bunker house. And that would make me super happy with my living situation. About a year ago, I did not borrow $100,000 to build on top of this house. I thought about it really hard. I was going through the process of pre-qualifying for a loan because I made a pretty good money. And then I was like, I'm going to pay X interest on that. I can't remember what X was. Which means I'm paying, maybe $130,000 or $150,000 for this addition that's going to cost $100,000. And if I lose my job, my mortgage is going to be twice what it is now. And that's going to suck. So that was when I realized I could just go outside if I'm feeling light deprived. And in fact, I think I'll build an outdoor kitchen this summer for canning if I can. Because I did that a year ago, I don't have twice the mortgage I have right now. Pretty awesome. We eat out very little. And when we do eat out, it's usually traded. Maybe once a month we'll go out, but because we prioritize good food and we learned how to cook good food, what happens is you go to restaurants and they're not that good. So not only does it take more time to drive there and wait for the food and get the food and bring, all of that, but heck, it costs a lot less money just to cook at home, and I can have 2 glasses of wine and not have to drive, and that's kind of cool too. We trade when we can. I've traded somebody to something for doing my taxes this year that, because business taxes are not my thing. And That's great for that person and that's great for me. And I have to say, the one place we aren't very frugal is our animals. Like, we have way too many pets, and the pets are not saving us money. So I'm going to be looking at that a little more carefully. The problem is people abandon their animals here, and I'm a softie. Now, the second thing you can do is grow your own food. Do it in a way that reduces cost, though. So if you're spending hundreds of dollars on the one tomato plant, well, I mean, maybe that's good if you're learning for the year, but if you're not doing it in a way that reduces costs or is teaching yourself a skill, it's probably not helping you. So when I say grow your own food, I mean, start with one or two things and learn how they can replace what you're buying at the store. Like herbs. If you're in an apartment and you have a sunny window and the capacity to keep up on watering, you can have a little herb garden, and now you have fresh herbs that you do not have to buy for $2 or $3 or $4 a packet at Whole Foods or wherever you go shopping, right? So that's a way you're building some frugality into your life, but you're also learning a skill that can help you later. Because if you're one of those people who saves like those, I don't know, 4,000 varieties of plants in my seed bank, have you ever grown anything? Because if you ever really need that, I hope you've grown something, because it ain't easy. So, it's a skill that you can do, and you can do it anywhere. You can do it in containers, in the city. It's the rare living situation. Like, my mom even did it on her houseboat, which was like kind of the equivalent of living in an RV. She grew basil there. It was yummy. That's all she grew. Like, she probably could have had a tomato plant too if she wanted, but she just didn't do that because she had access to my garden. But that's a skill you can learn in a way that you don't have to spend as much money on fresh vegetables. And frankly, it's just good. Like, people go off on organics and blah, 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 and how they're not logical and blah, blah, blah. And none of that means anything to me, because what's important to me is the flavor. There's all these other, we can debate if pesticides are good for you or not. We can debate if the organic industry is good or bad for the environment. But I can tell you one thing that you can't debate, and that is when I pull a tomato off my vine that's fresh and I hand it to you and you eat it, it's just better. It's better than the organic vegetables at the store. That's because it hasn't been shipped in a truck across the country and stored forever and specifically bred so that it doesn't bruise, right? It's flavor. And it's real dirt. Woohoo! Real dirt that I've grown my plants in. So anyway, that's a second way you can start building resilience into your life. And the third way is find ways to build ongoing income from your local area, a way that you control. Look around you. Say, what do you have? What do I have that can generate income without making me lose my mind? Right? Like, almost everybody has something. For us, we've got eggs, we've got coffee, we've got property rentals. I do consulting. I'm a pretty good presenter, so workshops are easy, and we run a newspaper. And hopefully someday this podcast will make me a little bit of money. Who knows? So that all sounds like a lot, doesn't it? But it started with one thing. And the first thing it started with was we had a guest cabin. And I knew that if we built the guest cabin, like remodeled it, that would then be an income source. And over the years, we've tried different ways of generating revenue from that. And we decided vacation rental is best because people who are here for a few days don't annoy us. People who are here for months and months and months have a risk of doing something over time that becomes annoying, if you know what I mean. Like, if your dog poops in my yard, that's going to be annoying to me. If it happens once on a visit, no big deal. If it happens day after day after day and you don't clean it up, which totally happened to us with our first renter. This was back when we allowed people to have dogs on the property. We don't anymore because we have poultry. But yeah, and his dogs would come up and poop right in front of our door. Like, it was awful. So you see, we just figured that out through trial and error. And then once we had that up and running, I had the chickens and they started laying more eggs than I needed. So I started selling those. And then I started roasting coffee and it was really good and people wanted to buy it. So I started selling that. And then consulting, of course, like I'm pretty good consultant at startups. If you're starting a business, I'd be glad to talk with you, right? that just fit with it. And, Mark's a reporter. And when we looked at what skills we had when we started building local income, he's like, this is what I want to do. And I said, I'll help you with that because I'm pretty good at layout and I know how to produce things for print. I know how to produce things electronically. The two complementary skills. So, I'm learning how to sell ads. He's better at it than I am, but I'm getting there. That's something that you have to get over, your fear of talking to people to be better at it. So I just go out and visit, and it's starting to come. So you see how, like, my situation isn't what would work for you, right? You have different skills than I do. What are your skills? What are your things? Maybe you're good at making hot pads and you can start an Etsy store. Like, there's so many ways, especially with where technology is going, that you can make money. And I really think passive income should be everybody's goal, so long as you're not losing money doing it, right? You got to take care of the basics. And the basics are food and housing before anything else, and some savings. And you don't want to spend all your savings on getting passive income started, because then if something goes wrong, you don't have savings. So remember to cover the basics first, but then look at how you can generate income other ways. It's very, if you are entrepreneurial, like I am entrepreneurial, the word I can't say, it's very easy to go overboard in the building income area and not do anything else. So be careful if you are that way. But if you're not, like, trying to start a million businesses at once, think about the one thing you can do to generate trade or income over time, because that adds resilience to your life. And then the fourth thing is to develop a real community around yourself. This is probably the most important one. You've got simplicity and frugality. You're starting to maybe grow some of your own food. You've started to figure out how to get income from things that you already love and have and know how to do. But if you don't have a true community around you, you're lost. And what I mean by that is both people locally and people with shared interests. So I have a relatively new community to me that I joined this year. I didn't know I was joining a community when it came up, but there's this whole group of people who are homesteader, farmer interested, permaculture folks, and I found them in a digital community and just got to know them, and it turned out they're like my people, man. And they're great. And they have been there for me through grandma dying, through all this stuff going on in my life when I've needed somebody to talk to. They've had new ideas and the occasional smackdown when I'm just going into the I can't because. Like, every time you hear yourself saying I can't because, figure out how you can. Or figure out that you don't want to. These guys are great at calling my BS. And, I didn't go into that community thinking, hey, I'm developing a community and I need to use them for something. I just got to know them, and we all like each other and we help each other. In fact, one in particular, right after I lost my job, has been helping me close a new deal that is probably going to give me a pretty good revenue stream if it goes through. And he's been busting tail on that, and I really appreciate it. This transition would be so much harder if I hadn't stumbled into that particular community. And so they're a real community of people who actually care about each other. This is different than the trumped up, like, fake communities that we get told to participate in, like, your public school community, where you are forced to go there, you're forced to interact with those people, and you might actually like some of those people and have a real community there. But a lot of times, if you think about who you're hanging out with in some of these orchestrated communities, or even at work, man, a lot of times we're not working with people we really like, but we have to pretend to like them, or we kind of like them. But if you weren't forced to invite them to your kid's bar mitzvah, would you? If you were really in trouble, would you call them? Or if they were really in trouble, would you help them? Like, start asking yourself that kind of question. The community I'm talking about earlier, I didn't go in there to use their help. I went in there because I wanted to find people who had shared interests. And I think the thing to keep in mind as you are just developing your networking community is that you're there to serve. When somebody says, I'm looking for something, and you know somebody who has that something, you're there to serve. You're there to connect those people. You're not there just to suck off the community like a vampire. any community of people will quickly identify if you're just using them. You're there to build meaningful relationships, and that means time. It takes time to get to know people, and you may care about them because they're human, like you care about all humans, but you do start caring about people more when you hear their opinions about things, and as you get to know people. Very important. And you know what? Yes, sometimes they're there for you too. But if you come in with a servant warrior perspective, I am there to serve, and I'm there to connect people when I can, and I'm there to lend what I have, then people see that sincerity, and you have to do it sincerely. Don't fake it. It ain't worth it. I mean, this same community, there was somebody who was, I think, fairly active in it a year or two ago, who then became too busy to be there. And I think it kind of hurt some people in that community that the person just sort of disappeared and left them. And I think that's because that person probably wasn't there to really serve. They weren't there sincerely. Like, I wasn't there sincerely to begin with either. I was just there because it sounded like a new thing. And then I went there and found that these were my people. So, I mean, strategically, I just went there because I wanted to see what it was all about, right? And it turned out to be pretty awesome. And, that same community exists for me here locally, where I've gotten to know great people in our community, mostly through the farming channels, but also just through ads, like all these different things I do, singing in the choir. And some of those people are my people, and y'all know who you are. You probably listen to this podcast. It's part of what has to happen. If you're building resilience, building community means you're there to help them, and they're there to help you if something goes wrong. And so just to review, why build resilience into your life? Well, because life is changing, and you're responsible for taking care of yourself ultimately. I mean, you can depend on some of the systems that are there right now, but what if they go away too? Wouldn't it be better if you're able to take care of yourself? And in order to start building resilience into your life, the 4 things you want to do is simplify and become more frugal so that you don't have to earn as much to cover things. Because $1 not earned is $1 not taxed. Grow your own food. That's just a skill you can learn that will pay off in your life time and time again. Find ways to build ongoing income from your local area that you control, and develop real community. I'm going to go back to the grow your own food thing because it kind of sounds like I'm encouraging you to grow all your food. I'm not. If that's what you want to do, sure, I'm going to encourage you to do that. But I just mean some of it. Learn the skill. Choose one thing to replace. Just get going on that, and you'll start seeing if you like it or not. And some people will go into that and hate it, but boy, it's sure worth it when you're good at it. Okay, next up, we have the update on how the Holler Homestead business is progressing. Because guess what? That's apparently my full-time job now. This year we launched online, and we re-upped some of our community sales, and we're selling pretty well on Facebook in stores, in one store. It's about to be 2 stores. And it's starting to generate income. I only have 3 egg subscriptions left. So if you were thinking about an egg subscription, you probably should talk to me about that soon. And I did build the egg business as a small ongoing source of revenue, I'm not planning to do like a bajillion eggs. Like these are eggs that are produced in a small amount so that they are high quality, and I don't run out of bugs and grass for the animals here, because they are truly foraging a lot of what they eat. And I think because of that, they're being considered by a farm-to-table restaurant. So I'll keep you posted on how that goes. We got our postcards for the coffee this week, and that's because I'm preparing to go to Jack's and wanted to be able to hand something out. And it was kind of fun. It took, typical marketing discussion, hour-long conversation about what's the core of the Hollow Roast coffee brand, and how does that fit into a postcard. And I think, so Hollow Roast coffee is a dark roast. It comes from Bolivia in the Caranavi region, and it's got a fairly robust, nutty, not too bitter flavor. It's a tasty coffee, and it is roasted in small batches. It's a premium coffee, really. it's both a premium bean and it's handled in a premium way once I get my hands on it. So I was kind of going for, originally with the brand, I was going for a hoity-toity premium coffee thing because it's $14 a pound, man. Like, it's not cheap coffee. And then as I started talking about, with the person who was helping me about the core brand character, it's also simple. And homestead living is simple too, right? So we settled on it's a simple thing that you enjoy as a luxury of living in the country. And from that, we built this postcard, and I put it online, just a picture of it on Facebook, and I sold a pound right away off of that one postcard. So that pound of coffee will pay for the printing of the postcard. So that was pretty happy day for me. So it is starting to take off. I'm not at maximum capacity yet, but I'm bringing in about $400 a month profit, and this is replacing our health insurance cost. So right now, coffee and eggs are paying for health insurance. So that's pretty cool. That's, I kind of look at revenue streams like that as, in comparison to what in my life I no longer have to pay for. So Holler Homestead's doing well. I'm, knock on wood, planning to do a workshop in mid-September and hoping that will both link people up with some skill building opportunities and generate a little bit of revenue. This, again, isn't our primary revenue source, but I love doing workshops, by the way. So why not build that into my lifestyle, right? Okay, next up, I'll give you the update on the Center Hill Sun. We lost $45 in our last edition. We were so close to making our first profit. And we would have, except for one advertiser pulled out at the last minute. And I even printed this paper as a thank you with a free ad for the person who got us off our bums to get it started. And then I lost $45 on it. And I mean, with my new reality, we can't afford to lose money on this anymore. So we've been pushing really hard to go over the break-even line this go around. And been hitting the streets a bunch to do this. Some people, I said the biggest thing I'm learning about the paper is people are really freaked out by ad prices when you are higher than other publications. And we are more expensive than other publications in the area, but we're a better value, right? We're getting more results for our advertisers. And the reason we are is we distribute 20,000 copies in the area via 15,000 of those through the mail. So they end up in people's mailboxes. The content is catchy and interesting, and they read them. And because they read the paper, they see the ads. And so the feedback I'm getting from my advertisers is they get way more mileage off an ad in our paper than they do off of some of the other local sources. And the other thing is the other local sources might distribute 3,500. 5,000, 6,000. So we're just also distributing a much higher number of papers. So there's a better chance of getting seen if you're in our paper. But then, you're out there selling ads and they're like, why is it so much more expensive than competitor X? And I'm like, well, because competitor X sells 25%, like distributes it to 25% of the people. And it's that same, because they're subscription based, it's the same people every single time. And you're not getting like the advantage of being in a rest area. So why am I going into this? Well, because the sales pitch, man, if I would have known that about my sales pitch a year ago, we would have been doing much better already. But it's just interesting to me that you have people getting results who are then like, yeah, but I don't want to renew because it costs money. And I'm like, well, advertising costs money. And I am the last person to push somebody into advertising where it does not work for you. But if it's working, you probably should keep doing it. And the other thing that's happening with the paper is I'm learning that we are really a collections agency. So we send invoices and people put off paying them as long as they can. So I've had to become a jerk. And that's fine. I don't mind being a jerk. If you owe me money, you should pay me money. We have started getting inquiries from people who want to do something similar in their region. And so we're starting to offer, like startup newspaper, local newspaper consulting services. I'll let you all know how that goes. So that is starting to turn into something interesting. Next up, we have stories from the Holler. This is where we share what really happens, for better or worse, on the homestead. And under this, I want to talk about the highlight of my week, which was the Cider Hollow grafting event. David, thank you for bringing that one to my attention and for putting that together. It was, well, it was fun to see somebody else's homestead, and he's fully off grid, right? So no power there except for power that he generates. And that's kind of cool. And he built this really awesome composting outhouse. So that was pretty cool too, because I want to build a couple of those out here and I'm able to steal ideas. He had a ram pump. If you don't know what a ram pump is, it's basically a way to use gravity to pump water that's down low up high so that you can then use gravity for your water pressure so you don't need power for your system. So he has a ram pump, looks like it's pumping up to a storage tank above where he lives so that he can have water without any power. And I'm hoping that David will come show us how to make one of those, because I've kind of been dreaming about ram pumps for a while. But the workshop, it had about, 10, 12 people there. And the coffee lady was late. Guess who the coffee lady was? That's me. So I had kind of carefully looked at how long it would take to get there, knew I had to get my butt out the door. The butt did not go out the door fast enough, and then I had a situation with my dogs that needed attention. So I got out about 20 minutes late, ran into some issues along the way with the trip, and I got there at like 10 minutes after the workshop started, which is a total coffee fail. I told David, next time, I guess I better come the night before and just sleep here so that the people who get there wanting coffee have coffee. And then we hooked up my electric coffee maker to the generator, and that didn't go so well either. So the customers there or participants there got percolated coffee made the old-fashioned way with a gas stove. All in all, I think the workshop was really great. Cliff from Spiral Ridge Permaculture, he knows a lot about more than just trees, by the way. So he was doing the grafting workshop, and of course, if you were there, you learned how to graft. But what was interesting about Cliff, I'm probably because he's coming at things from a permaculture standpoint, is you have somebody with a vast experience of how things work in the state of Tennessee. So you could ask like plant varieties. Somebody was asking about cover crops that work well here, and using animals instead of farm equipment to maintain things. It was really a good choice of presenter because he was so knowledgeable. And I think, if you didn't go, you missed out, man, because I know how to graft stuff now. I did have to leave a little early, so I didn't leave with my tree, but a friend has my tree for me. Next time Cider Hollow puts something on, you should check it out if you're in the area. It was definitely worth the drive. I'll say that. And my only fail was in, a little over scheduling, so I didn't get to stay as long as I wanted to. But what do you expect 3 days before you're going to another workshop, right? So good job, David, on that, if you're listening, and hopefully you got what you needed out of it too. The other story from the homestead we have this week is about hive splitting, the wild hive, which I used to call the mean hive, but y'all know that I've now decided to embrace it as a wonderfully robust hive. My bee mentor came out, and so the way I even got into beekeeping was this swarm was at a restaurant up on the hill. He came, and we spent 4 hours collecting it because I didn't have a bee vacuum. I now know where to get one to borrow, but I didn't have one at the time. So we were just scooping handfuls of bees into boxes, and it was such a big swarm that it took us 3 boxes. Mark had to come up with an extra just bin, and we got him set up in a hive at my house. We didn't even know if we'd found the queen or not, but apparently she was there because I had this awesomely, a little bit overly defensive, if I might say, but resilient and productive hive for a year. And we were a little worried about mold earlier this year, went in there yesterday, and there was no mold. So they'd cleaned that all up. And I saw the queen for the first time in a year yesterday, and we kept her in there. And then he took some brood and some bees away under the hopes that what they'll do is make another queen when they realize the queen is missing. So we'll let you know how that goes. I did make a video of the hive split. up on YouTube at our YouTube channel. I'll throw a link to that in the show notes. It's just a quick little, 2-minute video showing you about midway through when both hives were open and Ken was getting his kind of put back together, just how it looked, what we were doing. But the funny part about the hive split is that Ken came in with his truck, parks it right in front of my house. He brought some frames with a little bit of honey left in them and was using those so he could put the hive together with some resources in it for them, so that we didn't rob all the resources from the existing hive. And then he had some frames that were built out, and bees are like super, like if you bring a frame out that has honeycomb on it, bees love it. They're like, smells good. Maybe I'll take some of that home with me. That's kind of how bees are. So he parked right in front of my house. We went up, we split the hive and walked down the hill, and there's this like tornado of bees in the back of his truck, like hitting the extra frames that were sitting back there, because of course they found the honey resource and they had to get all over that. So we moved the hive down, strapped it up in his truck, and there's just bees everywhere. And they weren't mad at us. They were just everywhere, like running into your head and stuff because there's so many of them. And he was like, okay, I'm going to pick up these frames. I'm going to tap them. I'm going to jump in my truck and I'm going to drive away. And he drove away in this like cloud of bees who then eventually came back. But after he left for like 45 minutes, there were still all these bees in front of my house looking for that honey because they were like, wait, where did our new food source go? So it was kind of funny. At first I thought it was angry bees from the wild hive because they were kind of pissed at us. They stung my finger one time and he got stung a time or two. They don't like it when you like mess around with their brood, by the way. But I thought they were angry because in the past what has happened with that hive is I'll go in and then for 24 hours, every time I walk outside, I have these 2 guard bees that come and like buzz my head. They won't sting me, but they like let me know that that they're there. It's like they get assigned to me. They won't get in Mark's face. They'll just get in my face because I think they can like smell us and they know who we are. That's stopped happening. But so I figured there were some guard bees out there for me, but no, they were just looking for the honey and they eventually calmed down. One of the cool things that happened while we were in that hive though is we saw a bunch of drone brood, and the progression of a hive apparently is that they build a bunch of drones and those go out the door to go have sex with the queens, other queens from other hives. And then they start building, feeding one of the female eggs, royal jelly to make queening brood. And then the hive splits. And when it splits, like the new queen comes out and she kills all the other potential queens. And the old queen gathers up a bunch of bees, which carry some of the resource of the hive, and they fly off to a new location. So it's the old queen that's leaving when you catch a hive, not the new queen. Well, hopefully by splitting the hive, they won't feel so inclined to separate right now, because this was an early queening swarm last year. So we're hoping to get that split. He gets some of the vigorous bees, which he's really keen on. And I am hoping to split my other hive too. So we'll see how that one looks when I get back from Jack's. But very excited, having gotten through that with only having one sting on my finger. And I had a glove on my finger, so it was fine. Do check out the video on YouTube. And with that, remember, if you like the show, you can support us while drinking a marvelous simple cup of Hollow Roast coffee. Just go to livingfreeintennessee.com and click on coffee, and you can order it, mail order by the pound, or for local pickup if you want. I'm dropping some off in Cookeville today, as a matter of fact. And if you want to drop me a question, topic idea, or comment, feel free to email me at nicolesauce@gmail.com. And for those of you who prefer YouTube, we do have the show up over there, as I've said. I've got 27 followers. The goal is 100. So if you have not gone to YouTube and hit follow on that channel, go for it. The link is in the show notes. That'll help me get a vanity domain name there, or youtube.com/livetn. Do remember, if you are a listener to this podcast and when you buy the coffee, you type in the coupon field live, LIVETN, you will get 10% off your order. So just a little verbal only note on that coupon code. Next week, there is a 50-50 chance that the podcast will be skipped. Sorry about that. I'm going to be down at Jack Spirko's for 5 days. Probably not getting enough sleep because I'll be in a tent, giving a presentation and learning a ton from other homesteaders and permaculture people. And it is very possible I'm going to come back up here and just like spew out a show on all the awesome things that happened at the event, right? Without notes, which means it won't be very organized, but I might do that. It's also possible that I will come back with no voice because I've been talking too much and I might need a few days off to rest. I don't know. I'm getting back really late on Sunday night, so anything could happen Monday. There is also a chance that they might be able to give me audio from the presentation in which case I'll just make that the podcast. But I am sorry in advance if I don't get the podcast out next week. If I don't, the following week we will resume. And the topic in 2 weeks, knock on wood, assuming all the technology works well, we may have a very special interview lined up with one of our listeners who is at this very moment on her brand new piece of land. That's right. Dory has closed on her land and is out there right now checking it all out and making her plans. And I thought it'd be really fun to have an interview about, with somebody who has just started moving towards more of a homesteady sort of off the land perspective. And the piece of land she got is awesome. But I'll let her tell you about that. Anyway, I know you are working hard if you are a listener to this podcast, or rather that you are a hard worker. Otherwise, why would you be attracted to it, right? And I know that you're probably also a dreamer too. Resilience can mean the difference between getting stuck in the day-to-day scramble to pay your bills or building better stability into your life. And really the homesteading life for me has helped spark that on. But for you, I know it boils down to you, not me, right? So I think it does. Anyway, with that in mind, remember that it's up to you to go out and make it a great week.